I'm Danny Lynch, and this is Knowledge is Power, a podcast that explores culture and identity through individual experiences. This week, we'll be speaking to Bailey Hamlin and learning more about her identity and her individual experiences as a queer woman.
I identify as bisexual and just a cis woman.
So before I interviewed Bailey, I didn't really have any preconceptions of this identity, but at the same time, I had no knowledge or understanding what it was like to be a bisexual woman. I also had forgotten what cisgender is. Cisgender is when somebody's gender identity conforms with their biological sex. So for example, if somebody's biological sex is a woman and they identify as a woman, they're cisgender. If any, do you think there were any influences or factors in your life that shaped your identity?
I think that's an interesting question because a lot of people are torn by the idea of whether or not queer identity you have that from birth or if you're kind of like socialized to have it. And I do believe that kind of both ideas and, origins of your identity as a queer person are valid. I personally think that I kind of just was socialized into, kind of realizing that women were another option for, romantic and sexual involvement. So I don't think that there were any, I don't necessarily think that I was born, innately this way. Just kind of that maybe throughout time I realized that, hey, women are attractive too, and I could date one, and that's rad. And so I did it, and it was rad.
So this was interesting because this was kind of a new idea for me. It wasn't something that I put much thought into. I always kind of figured that it was more just nature and not so much nurture. But it's strange. I think maybe I didn't put thought into it because I've always been advocating for this community, and there's a lot of conservative people who feel that it is just nurture and people can change and they can get out of this. So this really kind of put a new perspective and a new lens in seeing that not everything is just nature or just nurture. So let's look at how Bailey's identity has shaped her.
I think it's really changed my perspective on gender roles and gender expression. I think for me it's been interesting navigating my relationships with guys versus girls and how I choose to present myself, my outward appearance when I'm in those relationships, and also kind of what role I play within those relationships with my partner. I've kind of got to explore different roles and different forms of gender expression, and it's really just kind of opened my mind further to kind of the spectrum that both gender and sexual orientation operate on.
So now I just want to know what Bailey absolutely loves about her identity.
Love
Yeah.
about it? I mean, I get the best of everything. I don't know. I mean, there's more options. I am attracted to guys and girls, sexually and romantically, and I think, again, going back to gender roles, I'm attracted to masculinity and femininity, and so it's just nice to have both of those, no matter what the downfalls are of being socialized as masculine or feminine. It's nice that I can kind of enjoy both of those in a partner.
Although I don't understand how it feels to be marginalized by holding this identity, I'm very aware of the marginalization this identity is faced. But I was curious if Bailey had felt any marginalization or discrimination herself, being a young bisexual woman.
I mean, I think that there is still a lot of kind of institutionalized and systemic oppression against the queer community as far as, legal rights and marriage and that kind of stuff. But I think that I'm a little bit too young to have experienced any of that directly. I'm not married to somebody of the same sex yet. We'll see. I think mostly what I face is maybe just little microaggressions in regards to my sexual identity. Comments from people would be the most that I'd say I'd face.
Whoa, that's something I didn't even think about. I mean, I'm aware of microaggressions, and I'm aware of so many people facing microaggressions. But Bailey's a good friend of mine, and I didn't even think about microaggressions that she probably faces on a daily basis. That makes me want to know more about what was Bailey's experience like in higher education, especially at a university that is maybe not as diverse as others.
It was really interesting. Because I kind of came into my identity at the beginning of college, and I'd kind of I'd thought about it in high school, but really came into it when I was in college, and it was interesting being a part of Greek life. While I knew I had this identity, it was much easier to kind of push to the back of my mind and not actively live within that identity, and it was easier for me to just fall into like a heteronormative pattern of behavior with the Greek life system, because it was so, heteronormative itself. It was easier to go to the date parties and do all those activities with guys because that's what everybody else is doing, and that is kind of part of my identity, is liking guys. But I think once I got out of that Greek life system is when I really started to explore my identity as a whole and felt comfortable enough to consider dating women and really opening up and actively living that part of my identity.
So before we go on, let me explain heteronormativity. Heteronormativity is the belief that people fall into distinct and complementary genders, such as men and women. And these genders have natural roles in life. For example, men like women and women like men. It asserts really that heterosexuality is the only sexual orientation. And this is a big misconception, which made me more curious. What other misconceptions are out there?
I think some of the misconceptions are that we are greedy, that we can't make up our minds, that we're secretly gay but aren't just ready to come out as like fully gay yet, that we'll cheat. That's a misconception because we're like sexually greedy. I'd say those are some of the big ones and ones that I've faced personally from people.
So I'm really glad I asked that question, just because I think knowing the misconceptions and the stereotypes of an identity or culture is power for you to advocate for them. If we're aware of these misconceptions and stereotypes, then we can actually set the record straight. That's why I want to take the time to let Bailey set the record straight and express what she would want somebody to know about her identity.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, including myself when I first was exploring my identity, they think that being bisexual means you're 50-50 split, equally attracted to, your gender and, the opposite gender. But I would say that as any, sexual orientation, bisexuality operates on a spectrum. And so you can be very attracted to women and not very attracted to guys, but it's still on there. And for me personally, it kind of oscillates and fluctuates, and sometimes I'll find myself more attracted to guys, and women are less on my mind, and then vice versa, and it kind of changes. And so I think that it's important to when thinking about bisexuality and any other queer identity to realize that those can operate on a spectrum and they're not set in stone.
I love how Bailey put that. I mean, nothing is set in stone. Everything in some ways is on a spectrum. Nothing's black and white. And it seems that our culture and a lot of parts of our society wants to make everything zeros and ones when it's just not like that. And things don't always fit in the one mold or one shape. So what is the climate like right now for someone who doesn't fit into that mold?
I'd say it's a little difficult because, at least with bisexuality, you feel isolated from both the straight community and also the queer community. There's a lot of queer, at least in my experience, a lot of queer women that kind of have misconceptions or judgments against bisexual women, thinking that they are, not really part of the queer community. They don't want to date them because of those other misconceptions that we talked about, being greedy or not making up their mind, or that bisexual women are really straight and they're just going through an experimental phase. So I think that is an interesting fact that within the straight community we're kind of viewed as like kinky or greedy, and then even within the queer community, we can be a little bit ostracized.
Wow.